you, Jen. I'd like to pick up the line of questioning on immigration and the border.
Okay.
And ask you two rather quick follow-up questions about some other topics.
You always like yes or no questions. I don't know if they're yes or no. Go ahead.
Answer as you will. But,
okay.
So on immigration and the border, as we discussed here today, Vice President Harris has been put in charge of addressing the root causes of the border crisis. Last Tuesday, she spoke with Guatemala's president, but she hasn't visited the border or Central America or spoken with leaders of El Salvador or Honduras. She was traveling this week, took time to visit a bakery in Chicago. I'm wondering, is she still working on this? And can you address the perception that she's kind of quietly backing off while Secretary Mayorkas is pursuing some Trump-era policies, such as potentially building new border barriers and potentially prosecuting people who illegally cross multiple times?
There was a whole lot packed in there. So let me just see what I can do here. First, I would say the vice president was visiting Chicago actually to talk about COVID and the importance of communities getting the vaccine when it's available and accessible to them. And so while she was there, like many Americans, she got a snack. I think she's allowed to do that. But she was there to talk about COVID and play a role, as she's playing a significant role on our efforts to address vaccine hesitancy, communicate with the public about how we can do this, and it's imperative to get the vaccine when it's available. Second, I would say that yesterday, and this is actually a statement put out by her team, USAID announced the deployment of a DART team. We only have these in a couple of places in the world, so this is fairly significant, to respond to urgent humanitarian needs in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. This is meant to help address the immediate humanitarian needs, whether it's drought, food insecurity, ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, and this is in communities that are still recovering. So that is actually an announcement made by the vice president's team earlier today. This is absolutely an issue that she remains committed to, is in the lead on. The Northern Triangle, which I'm sure you're aware of, but is not the same as the border. They're all related to each other, but addressing being responsible and in the lead on the Northern Triangle is working with these countries in the region, addressing the root causes, working with them on how we can address issues like long-term food insecurity, drought, the COVID-19 pandemic, hurricanes, etc. That's what she's focused on. I don't have an update on when she'll travel. I'm sure it will be soon.
But she's still working on this issue very much.
Well, they wouldn't be putting out a statement this morning if she wasn't, would they?
If you thought we already hit rock bottom in terms of petty, you'd be wrong. The reporter here is Stephen Nelson from conservative outlet The New York Post, taking a jab at Kamala Harris for stopping at a bakery despite taking the lead on the issue of the border. Now, I didn't think this needed to be said, but people are allowed to eat. Not every second of every day has to be spent delivering updates to The New York Post. Sometimes people need to stop for food or water. They might even have to sleep. I know, shocking. The simple fact is that conservatives are hell-bent on making the border into issue number one. Why? Because per usual, they don't have any popular agenda items. And so instead, they need to fearmonger to their base about scary brown people stampeding over the border and into your neighborhoods to take your jobs and sell drugs to your children. It is the same tired story on a perpetual loop, and it's a testament to how absent any actual policy is on the right. And this shouldn't come as much of a surprise, considering Democrats are introducing and passing legislation that is overwhelmingly popular throughout the country. Already, Democrats unilaterally passed the American Rescue Plan, the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package that 3/4 of Americans supported, and they did so with 0 votes from Republicans. They've introduced the American Jobs Plan, a $2.5 trillion infrastructure package, again with the support of the vast majority of Americans, and again with 0 stated support from Republicans thus far. And so as Republicans continue to turn their backs on legislation that the majority of Americans support, including their own constituents, of course they're trying to train everyone's attention elsewhere. Of course they're wailing about the border on a never-ending loop. Because what's the alternative? Trying to explain why they didn't think you needed stimulus checks? Why they didn't fund vaccine distribution? Why they didn't want roads and bridges to get fixed? Why they're not supporting repairs to VA hospitals? Why they didn't think getting broadband access to 100% of Americans is necessary? They will do anything to refocus your attention away from what most impacts you, because on those issues, they're not actually on your side. And that's not to say that the border doesn't matter, because it does, but the right has been unilaterally focused on the issue of immigration. And I'd argue that there are many issues that are clearly more important to Americans than the border. Issues like COVID, like vaccines, like jobs, childcare, schools, infrastructure, healthcare, guns, election reform. All of those issues are what Democrats are focused on, all while Republicans want you to think that the first, second, and third most important issues facing everyday Americans right now are the number of immigrant children claiming asylum at the border. Let's just think about this logically. Of all those issues I mentioned a moment ago, which one affects you the most, and where does border crossing show up on that list? Now, with all of that said, because the border still is an issue, albeit certainly not the only issue as Republicans would have you think, I do want to point out that this administration has reiterated its support for focusing on the underlying causes of this uptick in migration, which is the poverty, violence, and lack of economic opportunity in the Northern Triangle, the countries of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, where the vast majority of migrants are actually coming from. Kamala Harris's office today released a statement detailing her call with the president of Mexico, saying, quote, Vice President Harris thanked President Lopez Obrador for his cooperation on migration issues. They agreed to continue to work together to address the root causes of migration from the Northern Triangle countries of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, including poverty, violence, and lack of economic opportunity. They also discussed deepening the U.S.-Mexico relationship to target human smuggling and human trafficking. The Vice President updated President Lopez Obrador on the United States' effort to surge humanitarian assistance to the Northern Triangle region. And this comes in direct contrast to the strategies of the last administration, where Trump had actually cut off assistance to the Northern Triangle countries, which only served to worsen the conditions there, causing more migrants to come to the US, where Trump could then point to that increased migration as a pretext to ramp up his anti-immigrant policies. It was a vicious cycle purposefully intended to exacerbate problems that Republicans wanted to be able to exploit in order to win more elections. They weren't seeking to solve any problems, they were looking to create them. So with all of that said, this administration should undoubtedly work to resolve these issues at the border, including with financial assistance to the countries where the migrants are originating from, but be aware that they're contending with a Republican Party that doesn't really want these issues solved. That's why there was zero immigration reform when Republicans had full control of government just 4 short years ago. Because if the issue was solved, then they wouldn't be able to run on it like they did in 2016 and 2018 and now in 2021, the moment that Joe Biden took office. They want to be able to point to caravans like clockwork in October of an election year and say things like Donald Trump said about immigrants being rapists and drug dealers, even if they're more subtle in the language that they use. They don't actually want the border issue to go away because then they wouldn't be able to fearmonger about it exactly the way they're doing now. So in the meantime, Democrats will work toward actually fixing this issue with the caveat that yes, they may actually stop at a restaurant or a bakery to feed themselves, considering they're still human beings who tend to function a little bit better when they manage to eat. To see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the notification bell. And please subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I not only break down the biggest stories of the week, but I also interview major players in the world of politics, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, Nancy Pelosi, Katie Porter, Pete Buttigieg, Cory Booker, Jamie Raskin, and many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.